In a recent article in Watercolor magazine, I learned about Watercolor Canvas. So let's see how it compares to cold press and hot press papers. If you want to learn about the materials I'm working with, you can find those in the description below. So let's just start with a nice kind of milky mixture of watercolor here. And on the cold press, carrying over to the hot press and onto the canvas. Right away, that texture is pretty awesome. You can see some of a resist happening in the canvas. It's not quite as smooth, but it makes some really interesting kind of blotchy marks compared to the cold press and the hot press. So we're gonna let that dry a little bit. And now what I wanna do is just kind of wet the canvas first and see what happens when I allow some color to mingle. So I'll wet that down to a nice kind of even sheen. And then I'm gonna drop some color into it. Let's get some big old globs. And you can really see how on the papers you get this nice kind of burst of color, and you don't quite get that with the watercolor canvas. But it does have some interesting effects, and I like the way that it actually kind of describes the canvas in a little bit more. Add some yellow here. Let those colors mix. So we've allowed these to dry, and some simple observations right up front is the watercolor canvas takes a lot longer for it to dry. You can see down here it's actually still pooled up, and it's gonna be that way for quite a while. But it really enhances the surface in an interesting way. You can really see the lines of the canvas. So it is a very different texture. Let's see what a dry brush looks like here. So I've got some phthalo blue. I'm gonna just drag it across the cold press. The cold press being a rough surface, it really kind of showcases the texture of the paper when I kind of drag it across there. Now the hot press is a much smoother surface, so a much finer texture there, but you could still get some texture there. Let's see what happens with the canvas. So going across up here where it's dry, it really actually it feels a lot like working with oil paints or acrylics. So my take is that watercolor canvas really is its own thing. I don't want to treat it like it's another type of paper. It's got its own tooth, and it becomes part of the marks that you're making. You can achieve some kind of watercolor-like effects, but I think I really would want to approach this more like I would with an oil painting or an acrylic painting here, especially with some of the effects that we have down here. Because it takes more time to dry, I could use that to my advantage and allow for some of these really strong wet into wet things to occur in the colors here. With a paper here, it becomes a bit lighter, and you get really more of the mingling that you would expect to become to know in watercolor. So thank you for watching. Leave your comments below, especially if you work with watercolor canvas. We want to know your experience.